Welcome to the deep dive. We're so glad you're joining us today. You sent us this massive stack of HVAC specifications. I'm talking the official ACCA Manual D duct design standards, the airflow technical specs straight from Train and
Oh,
Amana.
yeah, it was a huge stack.
Right. But the real treasure in what you shared is this incredible collection of field data from Dave Hartzell. He's this 45-year HVAC veteran working out of central Oklahoma. And looking over your notes, I mean, I know exactly why you sent this to us.
It's a highly relatable nightmare, honestly.
It totally is.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine spending $9,000 on a brand new, top-of-the-line air conditioning system. The shiny metal box outside is humming. You hand the technician this massive check, and you walk inside expecting, an absolute oasis.
Yeah, you want it to be freezing.
Exactly. But later that afternoon, you step into your back bedroom, and it is still completely sweltering. You just spent $9,000,
Yeah.
and you're still sweating in your own house.
Which is just the worst feeling.
So our mission today is to uncover why your brand new AC isn't cooling your house and why the invisible, neglected ductwork sitting up in your attic might actually cost more to fix than the AC itself. Okay, let's unpack this. Why are we so obsessed with the shiny metal box outside when the real problem is hiding in our ceilings?
Well, I mean, the ultimate blind spot. We fixate entirely on the equipment we can see and hear, right? Like the condensing unit outside, the thermostat on the wall. And we just completely ignore the infrastructure that actually distributes the cooling.
Because it's out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. People assume the AC unit is the entirety of the system. But mechanically, an HVAC setup has three distinct, equally vital jobs. First, it has to produce the heating or cooling. Second, it has to move that conditioned air via the blower. And third, it has to deliver that air to the specific rooms where it's needed.
Okay, so produce, move, deliver.
Right. And that third job, delivery, is entirely on the ductwork.
I was looking at the brutal math and the train specifications you highlighted. And, wow, if you buy a perfectly tuned, ultra-efficient 16Z2 system, but you attach it to ductwork that has a 30% leakage rate.
Which is super common, by the way.
Right. You are functionally dropping that expensive unit down to an 11 SEER2 performance level. You are literally erasing a third of what you paid for right off the bat before the air even reaches the living room.
Because the physics dictate that production simply cannot overcome a failed delivery system. I mean, you can generate all the perfectly dehumidified 55-degree air in the world, but if the conduit carrying it is compromised, the production efficiency is meaningless.
Yeah. Hartzell's field notes use this really striking analogy for this. Putting a brand new 16C Year 2 system on top of bad leaky ductwork is like paying $9,000 for a Ferrari engine and then bolting it to a 1986 station wagon transmission.
That is exactly what it is.
And obviously, you wouldn't blame the Ferrari engine when the car won't shift into gear. The transmission, the delivery system, is guaranteed to fail. Yet, when the back bedroom is 80 degrees, homeowners immediately blame the new AC unit.
They do. Because, again, the delivery system is hidden under piles of insulation. So to understand why that transmission is failing, we have to look at the extreme environment where these ducts actually live.
Right, the attic.
Yeah. Hartzell's data from central Oklahoma paints a very specific picture of houses built between the 1970s and the 1990s. The ductwork in these homes relies heavily on flexible ducting, just laid loose across the attic joists.
Just kind of draped up there.
Pretty much. And because it's a flexible wire helix wrapped in a thin plastic liner and fiberglass, it sags over time. It gets kinked around trusses or crushed flat when someone crawls up there to, store holiday decorations.
Oh, man, yeah. And we aren't just talking about a benign environment. Hartzell specifically mentions the thermal load in these Oklahoma attics hitting like 130 to 140 degrees in July.
That extreme thermal cycling is the true destructive force here. Heating up to 140 degrees during the day, cooling down at night, day after day, year after year.
Just baking everything up there.
Exactly. When these systems were installed decades ago, contractors routinely joined the duct segments using standard cloth-backed duct tape. And we know now that under constant thermal expansion and contraction in a superheated attic, the adhesive on that cloth tape literally bakes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it loses its volatile compounds, turns to this dry, brittle dust, and the tape just falls right off.
Leaving massive gaps at the joints. Hartzell actually writes about going into these attics and literally seeing daylight shining through the connections between the trunk line and the branches.
It's crazy.
And I know the ACCA Manual D target for residential duct leakage is strict. Like, it dictates leakage should be under 5% of the total system airflow. But what is Hartzell actually measuring out in the field?
The field measurements are staggering. In a typical home from that era, the leakage isn't 5%. It consistently measures between 25 to 40%.
Wait, 40%? Let's translate that into actual air volume for a second. On a typical 4-ton AC system, which pushes about 1,600 cubic feet of air per minute, a 40% loss means you were dumping over 600 cubic feet of conditioned air straight into your attic every single minute.
It's a massive amount of air. To visualize that volume, the field notes suggest imagining a 5-inch round hole drilled directly through your living room ceiling.
Oh my gosh.
Just imagine that hole blasting cold, expensive air into the dark of your attic, running 24 hours a day for the entire summer. If you could see that happening in your living room, you would immediately panic and patch it right.
Yeah, of course you would.
But because the drywall hides it, homeowners simply pay the utility bill.
And Hartzell actually calculates that bill. In summer cost terms, pumping 600 cubic feet per minute into an attic translates to roughly $400 to $700 a year in wasted electricity.
The financial cost is severe, yeah. But the structural degradation is what actually kills the system. And it's not just the major catastrophic teep failures. The anatomy of these older systems is flawed by a death of 1,000 cuts.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Hartzell routinely finds 8 by 10-inch return air grills installed on massive 4-ton systems. A 4-ton blower requires a minimum of a 20 by 25-inch return just to breathe properly.
So they're basically suffocating.
Exactly. Or consider the supply registers. You might have standard floor grates from 1985, where the louvers are physically choked with 30 years of paint drips, pet hair, and carpet fibers.
Yikes. So the kinked flex duct, the tiny return grills, the degraded tape, the clogged grates, each of these acts as an independent 5 to 15% hit to the system's efficiency.
Yep. They just compound until the unit is functionally crippled.
Okay, so that's the crisis of escaping air. But the manufacturer specs you provided from train point to a secondary and maybe even more destructive issue. What happens when the air can't get through at all because the pathways are physically too tight?
Right, so we move from the problem of leaking to the problem of choking. What's fascinating here is how often this is misunderstood.
Yeah, because duct sizing is an exact science based on static pressure. When I first looked at these specs, I just assumed, if my house is hot, shouldn't I just buy a bigger AC, just get a bigger unit to push harder? A lot of the contractor quotes you forwarded to us actually suggest doing exactly that, like upsizing from a 3-ton to a 4-ton unit.
That is the absolute most dangerous misconception in residential HVAC.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Airflow operates on strict fluid dynamics. A 3-ton system requires a very specific volume of air, roughly 1,200 cubic feet per minute. Now, if a house originally had a 2-ton system, the main sheet metal trunk line in the attic was sized to handle 800 cubic feet per minute.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Right. So if a contractor upgrades the outdoor unit and the indoor blower at 3 tons, but leaves that original 2-ton trunk line in the ceiling, that new blower is suddenly hitting a massive wall of static pressure.
It's the coffee straw analogy. If you are trying to run a marathon, you need massive oxygen intake. If you try to breathe through a tiny coffee straw while running, it doesn't matter if you have the lungs of an Olympic athlete. You are going to pass out. Buying a bigger set of lungs or a bigger AC unit won't help at all if the straw stays the same size.
That is a perfect way to picture it. And the mechanical consequences of breathing through that coffee straw are catastrophic for the refrigeration cycle.
What actually happens to the machine?
Well, because the heavy resistance of the undersized ductwork slows the airflow down so drastically, the air moves too sluggishly over the indoor evaporator coil. That coil is filled with refrigerant-absorbing heat. Without enough warm house air passing over it to transfer that heat, the temperature of the coil plummets below freezing.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the natural humidity in the air condenses on the freezing metal, and within hours, your indoor coil is encased in a solid block of ice.
So the system is working so hard against the static pressure that it literally freezes itself to death.
Exactly. And while the indoor unit is freezing, the outdoor compressor is running continuously, trying in vain to satisfy the thermostat. The domino effect of this high static pressure is a massive drop in capacity. Your expensive new 3-ton system drops to a 2.25-ton performance level.
And simultaneously drastically shortening the lifespan of the compressor motor due to it just running constantly.
Spot on.
It's tragically ironic. Homeowners are sitting in 80-degree bedrooms, constantly thinking their AC is too small, paying to upsize the unit, when in reality the equipment is literally choking on its own ductwork.
It perfectly explains why Hartzell sees so many premium, top-tier units failing prematurely. They are essentially burning themselves out, pushing against a brick wall of static pressure.
Okay, so we know the ducts are either bleeding air into the attic or choking the blower entirely. If I'm the homeowner looking at this nightmare, how do I actually fix it and what is it going to cost? Let's look at the patch versus replace threshold in Hartzell's data.
Sure, so patch territory is viable when the fundamental sizing of the ductwork is correct, but you just have localized failures. A technician can go in and permanently seal specific leaking joints using mastic.
Mastic instead of tape.
Yes, unlike tape, mastic is a wet-applied elastomeric compound. It paints on like a thick paste and cures into a flexible rubber. It moves with the thermal expansion of the metal, meaning it never dries out and cracks like adhesive tape.
What's the typical investment for a targeted mastic sealing and minor repair job?
You're generally looking at a range of $400 to $1,200. For that level of intervention, sealing the plenums, straightening a few crushed flex runs, opening registers, you can recover a massive amount of lost efficiency.
Okay, that's not too bad. But Hartzell's notes define a hard line where patching becomes throwing good money after bad. What pushes a house into replace territory?
You enter replace territory when the core infrastructure is mathematically incapable of supporting the system, like those undersized trunk lines we just discussed. Or if you look at the flex duct and see it was manufactured before 1995.
What's wrong with pre-1995 flex duct?
It utilized a very thin fiberglass insulation that just does not meet modern thermal resistance standards. Plus, if the outer vapor barrier has become brittle and shattered, exposing the inner insulation directly to the 130-degree attic heat, mastic cannot save it. You just have to replace it.
Let's break down the cost of a full replacement, because the sticker shock on this is real. Hartzell's data shows a real-world example of a full duct replacement on a standard 1,800-square-foot house. It has 8 supply registers, 2 returns, and decent attic access. The total quoted cost is roughly $5,500 to $7,500.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It is. And I think a lot of people hear that and assume a contractor is just making a massive markup on cheap materials. But the material breakdown is surprising.
It really is. Out of that $7,500 total, only about $1,800 is actually tied up in physical materials. That covers the modern R8 insulated flex duct, the custom fabricated sheet metal trunk lines, the mastic, the metal hangers, the new supply boots, and the balancing dampers.
So where is the remaining $5,000+ going?
It goes entirely to intensive, highly skilled labor. I mean, a full duct replacement is a surgical operation. You are paying for a crew of 2 technicians to spend 2 to 3 full days working in an incredibly hostile environment.
Sweating it out in the attic.
Exactly. And duct design cannot be rushed. You don't just connect pipe A to pipe B. They have to carefully suspend every run so it doesn't compress the insulation. They have to paint every single connection point with mastic.
And the balancing aspect is huge, right? Manual D requires them to install manual dampers at the start of every branch line so they can artificially restrict the airflow to the rooms closest to the blower.
Right, forcing more air to that sweltering back bedroom.
Yeah.
Setting up those dampers requires taking airflow readings at every single register in the house and making micro adjustments until the entire system is perfectly balanced. Contrast that highly meticulous 3-day disruptive mess with a standard AC equipment swap. Swapping an air handler or a condenser is a highly standardized 6 to 8 hour job. The crew sets the new unit on the existing pad, brazes the copper lines, reconnects the main plenum, and they are done by dinner time.
Whereas a duct replacement means cutting open the ceiling, reframing supply boots into the joists, often cutting drywall in the hallway to expand an undersized return, dealing with 3 days of construction dust. It is highly disruptive.
Very.
Which explains why homeowners desperately want to believe a magical, cheap fix exists.
Yeah.
And I actually want to push back on something here. I see advertisements constantly for like $500 whole house duct cleaning. They claim they hook a massive vacuum up, blow compressed air through the lines, and solve your airflow issues. If I have 30 years of dust, pet hair, and debris coating the inside of my flex duct, wouldn't clearing out that physical blockage significantly improve my static pressure and airflow?
It seems completely logical, sure, but the fluid dynamics just don't support it. The layer of dust inside a duct, while visually unappealing, rarely thickens enough to materially change the internal diameter of the pipe.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't alter the static pressure. Furthermore, a spinning brush in compressed air cannot fix a crushed piece of flex duct. It cannot seal a daylight-sized gap where the trunk line has separated. And it certainly cannot expand an undersized sheet metal trunk.
So the $500 vacuum job is essentially a waste of money.
It's actually worse than just cosmetic. In older systems, aggressively brushing brittle, pre-1995 flex duct can actually tear the inner plastic liner, creating massive new leaks that didn't even exist before.
Oh, wow.
The industry consensus is that duct cleaning is only mechanically necessary in very specific scenarios. Post-renovation cleanup, where actual chunks of drywall have fallen into the floor vents after a flood to prevent mold growth, or in the case of a severe rodent infestation. Otherwise, you are wasting $500 that should be allocated toward mastic sealing or proper sizing.
Okay, let's pivot to the strategy then. Say my current AC condenser is 8 to 12 years old. It's struggling, my bills are high, and the back bedroom is hot. Based on Hartzell's data, where should I put my money?
At 8 to 12 years old, your equipment is right in the middle of its expected lifespan. If the root cause of the poor performance is the delivery system, replacing the AC unit is a terrible investment. The strategic move is to keep the equipment and invest heavily in fixing or replacing the ductwork.
Makes sense.
Hartzell notes that professionals constantly encounter 10-year-old systems that have been misdiagnosed as failing or too small. Once the static pressure is relieved through proper duct sizing, those units return to peak performance and easily run for another 5 to 8 years.
And if the equipment is, say, 15 plus years old?
If the equipment is nearing the end of its mechanical life and the ducts are degraded, you really must replace both simultaneously. While the upfront cost is intimidating, you save on a second mobilization. You do not want to pay a crew to mobilize, cut into your plenum, and balance the system twice.
Okay, this brings us to the most practical part of the data you sent us. We know the physics, we know the costs, and we know the common traps. So what does this all mean? When a contractor is standing in your living room holding a clipboard, how do you know if they're actually going to engineer a solution or just slap new tape on old problems?
Right, you need to know what to ask.
Yeah, and Hartzell outlines a very specific 5-question interrogation checklist. I was looking through these, and the very first one targets the guesswork. Did you do a duct leakage test?
This is critical because it demands empirical data. If a contractor tells you that your ducts need to be replaced without actually measuring the static pressure or the leakage rate, they are prescribing surgery without taking an X-ray. They need to quantify the failure before proposing the solution.
Second question. Did you perform a manual J load calculation? Now, I always thought contractors just looked at the square footage of the house, like 1 ton of cooling for every 500 square feet. Why is manual J so critical? No rules of thumb, right?
That 500 square feet per ton rule of thumb is exactly how houses end up with frozen coils and high static pressure. A manual J calculation is a rigorous mathematical model of your home's actual thermal load. It doesn't just look at floor space. It calculates the specific insulation R value of your walls, the orientation of your windows relative to the sun, the solar heat gain coefficients of the glass, and the specific climate data of your zip code.
So 2 houses with the exact same square footage might need completely different duct sizing if one has massive west-facing windows and the other is heavily shaded by trees.
Exactly. Questioning a contractor about their manual J calculation forces them to prove they are engineering the delivery system to the specific physics of your house.
Question 3. What is the new duct insulation R value? We established that pre-1995 flex is obsolete, but what is the current standard they should be quoting?
For a system located in an unconditioned space like an attic, the modern standard is R8 insulation. Anything less is a compromise, and you will lose cooling capacity simply through the walls of the ductwork before the air ever reaches the register.
Good to know. Question 4 focuses on the chemistry we discussed earlier. Are you sealing the joints with mastic or with tape? We know the answer must be mastic, but if a contractor says they use, like, high-quality foil tape, is that acceptable?
No. Foil tape is excellent for temporarily holding pieces of sheet metal together while the mastic is applied over top of it. But tape alone relies on an adhesive that will eventually degrade in extreme heat. Mastic is the only permanent code-compliant sealing solution.
And finally, question 5. What is the warranty on the ductwork performance? Not just the equipment, but the ductwork itself.
A reputable contractor who balances the system using dampers and performs a manual D-design will guarantee that the temperature variance between your living room and that sweltering back bedroom will be within 2 to 3 degrees. They stand by the delivery, not just the production box outside.
Hartzell really embodies this. He operates in Kingfisher in northwest Oklahoma, holds NATE certification and IGS HPA accreditation, and he performs a leakage and static pressure test on every single replacement quote. He even offers free estimates on combined jobs.
That is the gold standard.
It is. If a contractor blanks on these 5 questions, if they just poke their head into your attic hatch, look around and throw out a flat price, they're just selling you a price, not a job.
They are selling you a Ferrari engine and leaving the 1986 transmission exactly where it is, demand data over guesswork.
This dive into the specs has completely reframed how I look at home cooling. To boil all of this down for you, the absolute most expensive component of your HVAC system is the sprawling, invisible infrastructure hidden under your insulation. Spending $9,000 on a brand new unit without checking the ducts is a gamble you will likely lose.
It is a sobering reality check. We spent this entire deep dive uncovering how the unseen, deteriorating infrastructure in our attics quietly drains our wallets and ruins our expensive new machines. And it makes you wonder, what other invisible ductwork or hidden infrastructure in our daily lives, our businesses, or our cities are we blindly bolting Ferrari engines onto, fully expecting peak performance without ever checking the pipes?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. It really is all about the delivery, no matter the context. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully, armed with Hartzell's interrogation checklist and the manual D-specs, the next time you walk into that back bedroom on a July afternoon, it is exactly the oasis you paid for. Catch you on the next one.